going live. Should be like now on YouTube.
Okay. Let me check it. Preparations through education. Reparations through education.
Complete sent out. Resent it. I just don't know why it's got a countdown. But we'll soon find out. Let me guess this is alright, just came back into the country yesterday. Just went to Spain just for a few days. I just feel you must move.
Thank you so much. It's just like I find the communication
Speak to me hard.
I find it just so much just like I can't tell how much it's like.
Such is life. Alright, well, the link's live, everything's live, just have to wait for it to start now. Take it easy. Oh yeah, I won't say no. I won't say no.
Okay, testing. No, I'm just testing. Testing. Can you hear okay? Yeah. Audio is fine. Dion, is the audio fine?
Yeah.
We'll just be starting in 5 minutes. So thank you all again. Also testing for the people on Zoom.
You right, my friend? Yeah, yeah. Just no, at the reparations meeting. Yeah, but I have to leave soon anyway. My batteries proper low, so I can't really speak. Yeah, I'll show you.
Okay. Thanks everyone for your patience and for the lack of music or something to bring us into the start of this session. Everything's recording, we'll start now. And so yeah, I would like to welcome you all to this Ubuntugotkla Preparatory Action and Hearing session at APPGAR's house, at Houses of Parliament, London, United Kingdom. Today is Thursday the 19th of October 2023. Thanks firstly for coming on a working day to bear witness to this preparatory action process, where we, in an action of participatory democracy, are training ourselves to be the true judges and jurors of our own justice processes. And this has been a process that's been conceptualized by the Pan-African Reparations Coalition of Europe, which is the Ubuntugotkla, which really is about conceptualizing our own Pan-African and really for all people's tribunal justice process. And this builds on the history of the people's movements for reparations, the historic movements of people for reparatory justice, which has secured that not through going into the system and using the courts of the system to seek justice, but through establishing our own institutions and strengthening and consolidating our own institutions of power. And so it's important that we can, we're hosting this space at the, which is being hosted by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on African Reparations. My name is Kobana, and I'm the chair of this session and part of the secretary of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on African Reparations, and there's the secretary who are also participating in the event itself. And so we'd first like to open just by having a short moment of silence in reverence for our ancestors, but also in reverence for the many who are struggling and freedom fighting around the world, some of whose flags and symbols are present here, many of whom aren't, and many whose names we don't know, and many whose names we're yet to recover and restitute. So we honour our ancestors in the importance of today, that this is a day that continues their march, their ancestral march for freedom, which is a sacred journey that we are all invited to walk on together, to really honour their memory and what they've been striving for. So we see what happens. 30 seconds of silence. And so this event today is also part of the Sankofa Reparations Season Black History Month events. Sankofa is a Pan-African community global educational complex seeking to harmonize our educational and knowledge production of resistance throughout the African world. And this has been about reclaiming Black History Month in the UK, which is October, to really focus on promoting our Indigenous struggles, working with Indigenous communities and their resistance, and emphasizing that the struggle for Indigenous sovereignty is really at the heart of our Pan-African Preparatory struggle. It's not so much about the countries that we've been fixed into, the identities that we've inherited in the diaspora, but really about us returning to source and in the tradition of Sankofa, collecting the best from the past and reclaim for the futures that we build. And this is important because we are seeing that we're at a time of increasing eco-fascism, increasing racism and Afrophobia, which has been targeting and escalating what we know as the Maangamizi, which we know as the African Holocaust, Western state colonialism and neo-colonialism, which is forcefully expropriating communities around the world, forcing us into more marginal categories, and is only really about the reactionary violence that the system is meting out against our people as we rise. And just as we're having this conversation, of course, there's been mass uprisings visible throughout the world in Abyei, in Asia, in countries like Pakistan, and of course in Palestine, which is taking the news now through the real visibility of our community's efforts throughout the majority world for reparatory justice and liberation. And so it's in that same vein that we stand in solidarity. This event acts in solidarity with those to continue to uphold and amplify the voices of resistance of communities of resistance throughout the world. The last thing to add before we go through the structure of today is to note that this is leading to the inaugural APPGAR conference this weekend on Saturday the 21st and Sunday the 22nd of October. For those in person, that will be at Friend's House in London, United Kingdom, opposite Euston Station. But it will be accessible online for our international audience, which is really about us carving space in the establishment, aware that we're in an establishment zone. This is an institution that has been part and parcel of the criminality against all peoples of the world. It's the same institution that legalized enslavement, and it continues to legalize genocide to this day. We see it in its mobilization to defend war, to resource war, and increase extractivism on our communities. And many of these laws are still in place and impoverish and imprison our peoples around the world. So when we claim this space and when we're here today, it's also important that we see this as a restitution of our right to self-determination and a right for our voices to be heard and our communities' voices to be heard. Today is going to be a participatory event. You're invited to enjoy and engage with your own histories of resistance, with the struggles that we face in our daily lives, and to offer our own contributions from our own experiences throughout the day. We are going to open with an introductory statement from Esther Stanford Kosei and Kofi Mawuli-Klu of the Stop the Maangamizi Recharge Genocide Ecocide Campaign.
Okay, I was sorry.
Of the Stop the Maangamizi Recharge Genocide Ecocide Campaign. Okay, yeah. And then followed by a contribution from Ombara Ochitambi and Mutina Kachiwa, who will be speaking on the exemplary role of Ribeiro and Nama in our Pan-African Preparatory Justice assertion of the axiom, nothing about us without us. And then we will introduce our Ubuntukgotla Preparatory Action Learning Hearing Commission, who are our jury for today. Our jury look like us because we believe that the jury should be us and the ordinary members of our community. And they will be taking a stand, pleading to our ancestors to tell the truth. And then we will open with the testimonies. And today we have the honor of hearing on the Maangamizi crimes against the Ribeiro and Nama peoples, on the Maangamizi crimes against the Preparatory Nation, on the Maangamizi crimes against the Quilombos, which is the maroon Africans of Brazil, as well as on the Maangamizi crimes against the Mosi Guru of the Sahel region. So before we start, we will just have a short introductory statement from Ribeiro-Addy MP.
Apologies, all. I'll start with, I had to do something by 2 p.m. And I think I've just about done it, but we've got an extension. And welcome you all to the House of Commons. This is your space. as Cogna so eloquently put it, and I'm very, very pleased that you're able to have access to here, to hold events. Again, I'm sorry for what happened when you came into the room, into the building, and perhaps my expression towards it. Most of the time I'm an extremely diplomatic person, and I can smile and be quite okay with what's happened. But it always upsets me that when people from diverse backgrounds, people from the black community, people of African descent want to come into this building, there's often an issue about it. I know that eventually they will allow me to do what, and allow you as my guest here to do what it is that you have come to do, because I'm a member of Parliament and that is my right. But there at times is a push and pull and issues, but that is why we have to keep on coming back. We have to keep on coming back until it changes, until they understand that we have equality in this society, and that is as reparatory as anything else, to be treated with the dignity that we deserve as human beings, and the understanding that whilst we are here in this country, we will be treated like everybody else, and like the very, very important people we are. So I'm very, very pleased that you're here. I'm very, very pleased that we will be having further discussions around reparation justice today and going into the conference tomorrow. I apologise again for being in and out of the room because of some of the pressures of the conference over the weekend. It's Thursday today, isn't it? Yeah. I am losing track of days. And you know, a lot of the work that I do as a member of Parliament, representing individual people in my community is extremely important. There are other things that I have to do that I feel are unnecessarily bureaucratic and full of showmanship, but I'm very pleased that it affords me the opportunity to have an all-party parliamentary group on African reparations. If I wasn't able to do things like this, to convene groups like this and to discuss these very important issues, as far as I'm concerned, there will be absolutely no point in me holding my position and all the additional stresses that I have to bear. So I'm very, very pleased to do it. I'm very, very pleased for the support that you show to the various campaigns represented here, in particular our co-secretary, Maangamizi, and I'm really, really looking forward to watching back most of the discussions that I'm going to miss as I'm in and out of the room. But your dedication to this movement is so important, and do not let anybody be their security on the door, or other politicians that attempt to ignore this movement ever dissuade you from that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the very first opening contribution will be from Assistant Jose and Kofi Marie Clue from the Stop the Maangamizi Reach Out to the South African campaign, titled From the APPGAR towards the Ubuntugotkla in our Pan-African Reparatory Justice Repair of Law by our own unifying people's power for planet repairs to secure global justice for all.
Welcome once again to this one more step towards effecting reparatory justice for African people in such a way that it impacts on transforming the entire world towards the kind of equity that needs to be manifest in our world, to ensure that every human being lives his or her life to the full in dignity and benefits from the plenty that Mother Earth has made available to all of us without any discrimination whatsoever. We know that this is not what it is, and it is precisely for that reason that for centuries what we call the Maangamizi, which is say the Holocaust. It's really the intervention by a few who caused a lot of suffering to their own people, and then sought to globalize that by, wanting to take control of the world and its resources to the point of misusing, human beings, stripping them of their humanity and using them as chattel, and then also imposing, their rule on the majority of peoples of the world, that they regarded as not human, at all, and therefore exerted, their rapacious, control over them, and also over everything else in nature, to the point of destroying, the world, in the kind of, system they imposed, which has brought us to this point now. There's a hue and cry about, climate change and its impact in such a way that there is a greater recognition that all of these processes for hundreds of years now has brought us to the point where we may actually lose, all life, on Earth. I mean, this is something that was recognized by the indigenous communities upon whom were visited, conquest and pillage and destruction and murder on quite an industrial, scale. And this is what has brought us here. On the 12th of October, we have the commemoration of Indigenous Peoples Resistance Day, an anniversary of what we were taught in school is Columbus discovering, the Americas, right? And then we know what that meant. But the main focus of our presentation here is to look at how, in trying to repair the harm that this historical trajectory of a few from Europe, against the wishes of the vast majority of their own people. And that's something that we are not taught. That the resistance that was put up by ordinary people in Europe against this particular class of people, a resistance that was drowned in rivers of blood. We are not taught that. The heroes and heroes who tried to prevent this Maangamizi from being visited upon the rest of the world, in Europe, we do not know them. And part of our work is to encourage, people in Europe to rediscover their own heroes and heroes who would have, who gave their lives to prevent the calamities that were visited, upon us. And this is important because this small group of people that rose up and accumulated, literally deprived everybody else of, their right to land, to resources, and to life itself, right? Did so using law, right? And up till now, what we are taught as law, particularly those of us who studied law, in European paradigms, what we are taught is still trying to indoctrinate us with this perversion of justice, right? And without recognizing the harm that the perversion of justice that is still enacted into law from places like this, we will not get to the heart of what, reparatory justice is all about. Because there is nothing that has been done in committing these crimes against humanity that were not legislated into law. From this place that we now are at, right? And so when we enter this place, which is a law-making space, we need to actually come to the recognition that the first steps of reparatory justice ought to be developing the kind of consciousness that enables us to challenge this particular institution with the need to undo the laws of injustice that continue to be imposed upon us within this country and outside of it, in terms of what is called international law. And this brings me to the point about the need to overstand reparations, not just about paying money to anybody, which, as far as I am concerned, it doesn't mean that at all, right? But to see reparations as necessitating a broad array of repairs, most of which we, on our own, particularly within our communities, have to effect without wanting anybody to pay us any amount of money in order to carry out those measures of reparatory justice that we can do to ourselves. I mean, people have spoken about this array of repairs that individuals and communities and other groups, can carry out. But I would like to highlight amongst this the importance of developing critical legal consciousness. And that is something that cannot be left to so-called, schooled lawyers. Those who pass through the institutions that this system of global injustice has established in various places, who get indoctrinated with particular perspectives on law to enforce the injustice that stems from making ordinary people feel that they have nothing to do with law, they cannot understand law, and if they need to recourse to law, they need to find some particular specialists who've gone through this process of schooling to work on the law on their behalf. And unless we get that understanding that law is nothing but the will of a whole people or a particular class or groups of classes enacted into legislation, right? And therefore, if that law does not reflect your own will, you should resist it, disobey it, and compel it to be changed, particularly laws that enforce genocide, ecocide, the destruction of whole groups of people and of, nature, right? Now, this is critical to understanding reparations in the sense that if we still continue to believe that reparations is just money that those who are perpetrating, crimes against humanity and are using institutions of criminality that they legalize, as what should run society. If we think that is by begging them to throw money at us and keep the system of injustice intact in every sphere, right? Systems that they use to extract resources from us, including wealth, right? And wealth is not money. Money is one of the forms in which some kind of wealth gets expressed, right? But wealth is land, wealth is life, wealth is the world which belongs to all of us. And if we don't change the structures that some people at some point decided to impose, to say they own land, they own the world, they even own our lives to the point that they can do anything with our lives, and we do not want to actually undo that. We just want them to pay us money for harms that they keep on inflicting because they keep that system intact. That cannot be reparatory, right? So this is where, just to cut a long story short, this is where, as far as our cause of African reparations is concerned, we say the repair of laws are a critical part of it. But that starts with, first of all, instead of law that is imposed upon us becoming something that, is the will of a tiny section of the society imposed upon others, we must first of all make law again the will of the whole people in any particular country and of the majority at least of humanity as far as the world is concerned, right? And in our case of African reparations, we talk about an all-party parliamentary commission of inquiry for truth and reparatory justice, APPGAR for sure, as the first major demand. Why? Because we want each and every person amongst our African people who have carried the trauma of the harms done to our ancestors that get systematized into institutions that continue to harm us in the present. We want each and every person to have the opportunity before an institution like the British Parliament and tell their story. It is not for some particular group of so-called educated people, academics, professionals, or whatever they think, of themselves. It is not for them to usurp the right of every African or of every human being who's been touched by the African story. And there are many non-Africans who've been touched by our African story, right? They should have the opportunity to testify before a parliamentary commission and tell their story from one generation to the other as far as they can remember. So we said nobody should be putting any figures of money or talk about how, if there is going to be compensation aspects of reparations, nobody should be putting any figures until we have had that opportunity. Because when the world hears the stories of Africans, and what we have gone through from one generation to the other for hundreds of years. And then also hears the stories of those from other communities, including people from Europe, who've tried to stand with us, knowing the justice of our cause, what they've had to suffer from one generation to the other, right? Then the moral strength of that story alone will win for us the right to repair the harm. And so what we call the APPGAR is an important part of effecting reparatory justice. Because from there, then we can make institutions like this begin to make laws that reflect not just the will of a minority, but the will of the majority of humanity, including us. And that way, our African reparatory justice cause would actually have begun to make transformations that free not only African people, but also free the majority of, or all of humanity. This is, how our approach to law as far as African reparations is concerned. This is the thinking of those of us in the Stop the Maangamizi campaign that we have been propagating, which has led to the creation of this all-party parliamentary group on African reparations as a step leading to that. Now we have a body located within Parliament, which our colleagues like Bell actually took upon herself to ensure was a duty to do to us when she became one of the youngest people in Parliament, to create this space where we can bring our voices from all over the world, to begin to express. And the APPGAR actually has been inspired by an African woman who was one of the major civil rights leaders in the United States of America, called Fannie Lou Hamer. When in 1964, Fannie Lou Hamer, testified before the Democratic Party convention, the story of her life, born of enslaved Africans, captured on television and broadcast across the United States of America, stirred so much up that it began to effect changes in the direction of civil rights. And it is that Fannie Lou Hamer moment that we are seeking to create again by having an APPGAR that then opens the doors for our determination of laws that are made from this place that can ensure reparatory justice, not just for African people, but for all of us. So this is when we talk about the APPGAR, when we talk about the meetings we hold in this space, right? It's important for us, to recognize that this is not about just coming here and making appearances. There is a serious purpose to it. And that purpose, first and foremost, is to begin to give voices to many, many, many of our ancestors before us, who, if they dare to speak, had their tongues cut out. Yes. Right? To the extent of even getting themselves beheaded, drawn, and quoted, if you know what that means in British history. Right? So it is a sacred cause. It is something we are doing not just for ourselves, in fact, not for ourselves as much as for those, who perished before us. and many to come. And law is an essential, part of it.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm to follow on from Brother Kofi's contribution and opening comments, speaking really about the Ubuntugotkla, because today this is being framed as the Ubuntugotkla Preparatory Action Learning Hearing Session. And so just listening to him, I'm actually reminded by a quote from James Baldwin that I'm paraphrasing now, when he talks about the victim, and the terminology of victim here is meant in the sense of somebody who has been harmed, not in that kind of very pejorative meaning, but somebody who has been harmed, who has been impacted by enslavement, by colonialism, and their shared legacies today. So he says that something like the victim who is able to express their story, what has happened to them, no longer is a victim, they become a threat. And in that, he's speaking to the power of our testimonies, the power of telling our story. And there was a conference on reparations that was held in Nigeria around 1990, prior to the first Pan-African Reparations Conference that took place in 1993. And again, this notion of testimony and the importance of a hearing was raised. And there was a quote, which I'm paraphrasing, that speaks to the fact that the African people have an unassailable case that we've been building up over 6 centuries, that we are yet to be given a hearing. Yes? We are yet to be given a hearing. And that speaks to the magnitude of what is at stake here. And even though we know that reparations or repair is a process, that everything that has looked like some kind of justice, whether people use the terminology transitional justice, which is used a lot, especially in the global south in terms of establishment forces, feeling that, oh, well, we've done some justice here, it's happened. But everything that has come about, largely through the resistance of our people, has just been piecemeal. It's been huge, but it's been small in the big scale of actually documenting and there being a proper accounting for the wrongs. The wrongs, the crimes against our humanity that have been committed, the crimes against nature, Mother Earth, that have been committed. And so with the Ubuntugotkla, our notion as critical lawyers, Brother Kofi spoke about the need for raising critical legal consciousness. And as critical lawyers and jurisconsults who are specialists in jurisprudence, the science and the philosophy of law, we have spent, Brother Kofi far more longer than me, but a significant amount of time in working with our communities from the ground up in order to help raise critical legal consciousness. This is not something we are automatically taught, because so much that has happened to us has been normalized. Yes. It has been normalized. And even we ourselves sometimes struggle to find the language to express the magnitude of the harm and the impact on us. And even when we do recognize it and we use words that, we're speaking English here, we use words in English that might be familiar to other people's narratives, like genocide and other, crimes and war crimes against us. We are often shut down and prevented or certainly bullied and intimidated from describing our true situation and our true reality. And that is why we recognise that no matter what gains that we make on the international level, even at the level of the so-called United Nations, okay, which is very contested, whatever gains get made by various activists and organisers from our communities, those gains are minimised if they are not embraced, if they are not adopted, if they are not utilised, if they are not generative for our communities on the ground. Our communities on the ground who through miseducation have been taught to believe that we are powerless, that we do not have the power to shape law or make law in our own people's best interest. And that is a myth, it is a lie. And so as legally trained people, we have spent a lot of our work actually educating or helping to bring out that process within others, that people can recognize their own power and their own ability to shape and make law in our own people's determined best interest, our own self-determined best interests. And that leads us to how we came up with the formulation of the Ubuntugotkla. So the Ubuntugotkla is really a court of people's interconnected humanity. That's really what it speaks to. It speaks to the vision for a true world court, international court, made up of justices and our communities of resistance in resistance who make up the majority of humanity. Because what passes and what is called the World Court, and we've got variations of that, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, deny our people's just claim for repair. And many of these institutions are still deeply entrenched in not only colonialism, but coloniality. And there needs to be not only a decolonizing of the law and the legal architecture and infrastructure that we go to expecting some forms of justice. There must also be repair of the law. And this is something as legal activists that we have focused on, particularly in the Stop the Maangamizi We Charge Genocide Ecocide campaign that has spent a lot of time focusing on the repair of the law. So I'm now really sharing with you a quote from Brother Kofi from 1993, and this is historic because we take our work and our legacy, we build on the work that was done by reparationists before us, and that also some of us, like Brother Kofi before me, have been co-organising with. And in 1993, when the African Reparations Movement UK was formed by, co-founded by the late Bernie Grant and many others, including Brother Kofi, Professor Kimani Nahusi, Dorothy Kuya, who is now an ancestress, and many others. There was a paper that was presented by Brother Kofi charting an African self-determined path of legal struggle for reparations. And this was presented at the 11th December conference, Birmingham Working Conference of the then African Reparations Movement UK. And he says the use of law is one of the most important instruments of our African struggle for reparations. Indeed, the need to locate our claim to restitution for the damages caused by the gross violations of African sovereignty. It's not just about chattel slavery. The crime before that was the violations of our African sovereignty, which made us susceptible to being trafficked because of the destruction of our civilizations and our sovereignty, which weakened us, yes, and made us vulnerable to that capture within Africa, and then the kidnapping and trafficking. And much of the discourse today, even in terms of some of these reports, and I have to mention the Brattle Group report, minimizes or doesn't even recognize those foundational crimes. Okay? Because it will assume that we were just sitting there waiting to be kidnapped, to be taken somewhere on a cruise somewhere. And that's not what happened. So the importance of telling our story and speaking our truths, even when they go beyond or they challenge existing legal frameworks and institutions of so-called justice, is key, and why we have convened today. The other thing that was pointed out in this paper that was co-produced is the importance of utilizing or recognizing what is called international law from below. Because there is a perception that law is made by judges and lawyers and parliamentarians, those simply ensconced in the halls of power, yeah? The power of white supremacy or Eurocentrism, whatever it is. But actually a lot of law is made by those who from below, through their resistance to that attempt to deny their own power and self-determination and our own group ethics, that we create law. And that is also our people's story of how we have had to create and make new law, because the existing laws in any given time of our lives have not been based on recognizing that we are law creators and lawmakers. Okay? And that is something that we have to repair. But in this same paper that I'm talking about, there are 7 principles that are identified that should be followed when we seek to chart an African self-determined path of legal struggle for reparations. The first being demystification of the law. So this is something that many critical lawyers like us do. We demystify the fact that law is meant to be sacrosanct and somehow above us, that we cannot touch it, we cannot change it, that things are just written down and they can't, that there is no impact that we can have on not only changing it, destroying it, actually breaking it when it violates our humanity and our dignity. So demystification of the law, supporting those who haven't been formally trained or schooled in law and justice-making processes to recognize their own role and their own power as collectivities who are seeking to access justice. And law and justice in our African standpoint and from African law go together. Law and justice, when you've been trained in Greco-Roman legal systems and Eurocentric law, are totally 2 different things. And this is something I was told when I went to law school. I was very surprised when my law professor said to me, Esther, what we're teaching you here doesn't work out there in practice. And I thought, what am I doing here then? Why am I here at a critical law school learning about the law? Yeah? So the second point is developing legal creativity and in applying what has been referred to as the legal imagination. We talk about the black radical imagination, we talk about the political imagination. The legal imagination is our vision of what law is, what it should be, and our people's contribution to shaping and making just law. So the law of Ma'at, the law of Ubuntu, these are legal frameworks from our African people's self-determined standpoint that have been minimized, sometimes demonized, and not considered to be real law. But this is what governed our societies. This is how we governed our societies for millennia, before we encountered Arabs or Europeans. Okay? And this is part of what we are seeking to restore in terms of plural legal systems, but premise African people cannot be relying on European law that is a law of conquest, that has legitimized conquest and all of the crimes against us, legitimized the land grabs across Africa, whereby we now have to buy back land and compensate people who stole our land, our ancestral lands. And we call this law. How can we use the same master's tools to now fight our cause for repair? We cannot. And that is why even conventional legal practitioners, lawyers, why is it we've not seen a successful legal case for Pan-African reparations? It's not because of a lack of trying. When I came into the movement in the early 2000s, in fact, lawyers were dominating the movement. There were dream teams and Johnny Cochran's and all, especially in the US. There have been loads of cases. What's happened to them? Why are we not even doing our basic research to find out what's going on with all these cases? What happens when you try and tie a people's freedom struggle, literally, and struggle for liberation, within conventional court processes that don't recognize the foundation even of your claim? And how that in itself is so unjust. So unjust. Why should our ancestors, our communities, our freedom fighters come to the British High Court to get justice? That happened in the so-called Mau case. Matua and others, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. We were there in the High Court, and how profane it was to see Kenyan freedom fighters who had been tortured by British Army officers who were not literate in English, some having to just sign with a thumbprint, come to a High Court where you've got a High Court judge, a sole judge, sitting, determining their case. How absurd is that? That they have to fly hundreds of miles, thousands of miles, to come here to get justice in a High Court, which they didn't get, because there was a settlement. And you know why? Because all the reporters who were there reporting on the testimony, it was so devastating, it was so sickening, that the British state, the government itself, called for a settlement in order to prevent some of those testimonies being shared more widely because of the power of that. And then there was a settlement that, again, was done in such a way that it sewed up and prevented future claims coming from those who were victims of torture. A Maangamizi crime in Kenya. And there are law firms that made money off of this. And I have to say, at the expense of our people. And we can't just just close our eyes to this injustice. And the way even in which conventional lawyers will mislead us into thinking that they can provide answers to our people's struggles for liberation. That is dishonest, because there is such a thing called social movement lawyering, where lawyers have skills, competencies, knowledges that we can utilize. But the best way that lawyers can be of service is to work in service to our movements, where we ourselves as communities develop the legal strategies and tactics that we use to further our liberation goals, not the other way around. And this in itself is the way in which coloniality continues within conventional legal processes and systems. Okay? So I'm still on my 7 points and I'll finish very shortly. The third of the 7 points is there must be African popular democratic involvement in the lawmaking process. That means our people must have their say. Our people must govern, our people must be defining law, what justice means, and our people must be actualizing the justice goals that we intend to see. We cannot have our claim reduced to what will succeed in the current system that has no intention of yielding power. Because law, as has been said, is actually the will of the ruling classes of any given society enacted into legislation. The fourth is that there must be recognition of the criminal injustice of enslavement, colonization and neo-colonization from the perspective of the legal consciousness of African people. We are the ones that determine what was a crime against us. And that is what we use in our advocacy. And legal consciousness, to explain it, is the sum of views and ideas expressing the attitude of a group of people towards law, legality, and justice, and their conceptualizations of what is lawful and unlawful. Legal consciousness, therefore, traces the ways in which law is experienced and interpreted by specific individuals and groups as they engage, avoid, or resist the law and legal meanings and understandings. Legal consciousness also entails the process by which a group of people concretize their political goals and demands and the means by which they try to give them universal force in the form of laws and policy. It follows that legal consciousness is a form of social consciousness and closely related to political consciousness. The fifth principle is that there must be a judging of the crimes against us and the wrongs that have happened to us with, enslavement, colonialism, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and all crimes of aggression, but in accordance with African law. What is our African law? And it's not just for Atta Ubuntu. Many African legal systems are based on that, but we have many formulations of African law. So why, as African people, are we not utilizing and drawing on African law in our righteous struggle for repair? What do we know about African? What do we know about? Do you know about the law that your people have created in the societies that your foreparents came from? Do you know? And if we don't know, can we teach what we don't know? But why are we allowing someone else's law to govern our strategies for repair? Why? This is absurd. Would a Jewish person revert to Nazi law to fight for justice in terms of the Shoah? No! No, and that has not been happening. Because every people have the right to shape and define law, just as a Palestinian or any other people would. And of course there are contestations around our assertions of law and how some people's rights are somehow recognized more than others. But this is something that we have to struggle through. We have to battle through as part of our historic mission and duty in not only stopping the harm, but rehumanizing the world as part of our repair struggle. The sixth principle is that there must be mass adjudication of the African and other indigenous peoples' cases for repair or reparations through grassroots benches of the Ubuntugotkla People's International Tribunal for Global Justice. That's what we are doing here. It's part of that process of mass adjudication, whereby you don't feel you have to go to some ornate building that you are alienated from to be heard. These benches of the Ubuntukgotla must be happening in our areas, locally, nationally, internationally, globally. And imagine that what that will catalyze when all those testimonies are happening simultaneously in different geographical regions of the world, but they are all connected. Because half of is that part. We know what happened to us personally, individually, but we don't know what happened to our brother or our sister, our cousins, our extended family members that we don't even recognize that we're connected, because that's what's happened here with the dismemberment of our people. But now when we hear each other's stories and testimonies, a lot of those isms and schisms and divisions that we even internalize will disappear, because we realize that we were treated in similar ways despite the differences, and that we have been divided in the process of misrule. And lastly, there must be a developing of international legal strategies on the formulation and prosecution of the African case for reparations. Our case for reparations has yet to be heard. And part of the reason why it has not been heard is because we haven't got the mechanism. It's not yet fully formed to do justice, even to us having a fair hearing. And the Stop the Maangamizi, We Charge Genocide Ecocide campaign has two goals in it. The first being the establishment of the All-Party Parliamentary Commission of Inquiry for Truth and Reparative Justice, the APPGAR, which is creating this all-party parliamentary group for African reparations is going to help become more of a possibility. The second kind of landmark we have is to utilize that process of apsitage, conscientization and mobilization to establish the Ubuntugotkla People's International Tribunal for Global Justice, an alternative world court, a true court of humanity's interconnectedness. And this Ubuntugotkla, this court of humanity interconnectedness, the term is comprised of the two words Ubuntu, which speaks to African humanism and the fact that we are people through other people. And that term Ubuntu there are many words to describe Ubuntu across Africa, many different terms, but essentially similar idea. And then a Gotla, which is a Swana, a traditional institution of participatory democracy. That is a people's assembly or a court that is popularized in Botswana. And it has a number of functions, such as enabling public debate and consultation on policy and legislation, being a judicial institution in which cases are heard, providing access to justice, soliciting views from the communities on actions of governments and institutions and other decision-making bodies in society or any other interest group, and also facilitating the means to come to an agreement or key decisions pertaining to the health and well-being of the community, restoring Ubuntu. The planet repairs dimension. That is what we are seeking to do with these sessions and popularizing the Ubuntugotkla. And it's not just focused actually on the African case, although that is the founding motivation. We also recognize that other members of the human family who've experienced European settler colonialism in particular, and other forms of colonialism, have cases that need to be heard. but we are finding ways to harmonise and dialogue with elders and their own justices who are restoring, for instance, in Australia, Aboriginal law. Their sovereignty never ceded, and that is part of what they argue. Native American and other forms of indigenous laws of all peoples across the world, so that we can restore the law of humanity. So we have a law that serves our humanity, that serves our interconnection with all other species and all other kinds of living relations that we recognize, not just being human-centric. That is part of what we are seeking to do. Because the world is in need of a new model. And that is really up to each and every one of you. I close.
And so, thank you, Esther. And that was on from the exercise towards the Ubuntugotkla and Pan-African Reparations Justice Repair Law and prepares to secure global justice. Of what it is that we're seeking to build and what it is that we have to build. And that we also use that to centre examples of steps being taken, positive actions that we see as Preparatory live now from our mother continent of Africa. And that is why I've been honoured to introduce Ombara Ochitambi Muchime Kachiwa, who's contributing live on the exemplary role of the Ogoherero and Nama in our Pan-African Reparatory Justice assertion of the axiom, nothing about us without us. Yeah, we should be able to hear you.
To be tripping, so I didn't follow it throughout her presentation. If that's the case, I may have to remove the video and present by voice.
We can hear you fine.
Okay, let me upload to the screen first.
And if I didn't introduce properly, Ombara Ochitambi is the traditional
Yes, I'm on. I'm just to get the right screen. So to get the right screen with the screen presentation. So that when I move between the screens, the right screen. There we are. It's about to share. And you can now see me and see the screen.
Yes.
So thank you for, at any point, Kobina, please tell me if you can't hear. I would then take off either the video and do by voice. So the topic given to me is the role of the Ribeiro and Nama people in the African Preparatory Justice assertion of the axiom, nothing about us. That is the clarion call that we tell the community. So I am the Ribeiro traditional paramount chief. Do I move between screens now? Okay, here it is. The outline of the speech is I have briefly cut it into 6 pieces. I'm looking at the extermination orders, the genocide committed against the Hereros and Namas, its aftermath, then the German takings of the Herero property, the Herero Nama properties and rights. Look at the 2 governments, the German government and the Namibian government's efforts to exclude the Hereros from genocide talks or obliterate the Herero and Nama. Then our position that is nothing can be discussed about us without us. Look at the joint declaration, the agreement between the Indian government and the German government as to how they want to treat the issue of reparation and the subsequent lawsuit that were filed in the Namibian High Court. I want to end with our efforts to expand the awareness campaigns and networks to create a stronger community of supporters and solidarity organization. Now, the extermination orders were issued in 1904 and 1905, 1904 for the Hereros. And in clear sense, it basically says everything that is Herero, the cattle, being human, women, men, children, everything must be shot at sight. No life should be spared. Any Herero seen in what was German, Southwest Africa, must be killed or move out of the jurisdiction of the so-called German imperial government. The same extermination order was issued for the Namas, basically saying if you follow the Herero arrogance, or if you don't submit to the German authorities, Namas will suffer the same damage or the same fate that the Hereros have suffered. Sorry for the noise, it's to be dogs barking. Aftermath, in short, after the genocide, 80% of the Hereros, oh goodness, sorry for that. I can't, it's outside, I can't control, almost want to walk. 80% of the Hereros were exterminated. That is 65,000 or 80,000 Hereros. Then there were the expropriation decrees issued in 1907 and 1905 to expropriate everything that is Herero land and their livestock. About 205,000 cattle were expropriated. That is in addition to goats, sheep, horses, donkeys, and so on. Hereros were displaced to Botswana, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Togo. Those that remained, the fewer than 10,000 that remained, were put into concentration camps at Tashak Island, Swakopmund, Windhoek, Buro, Karapa, Vokahaja, concentration camps. As for the Namas, 50% of 20,000 Namas were exterminated. All of their land and livestock were expropriated by these formal decrees, and also they were displaced to Botswana, Togo, and Cameroon. The same concentration camp, mainly Shaka Island and Swakopmund, were placed where Namas and Hereros were put to slave labor. The takings that the German government of the time took were all real property, as I referred to in previous slide. Our rights, personal properties, taxation, concessions, revenue, all that was generated from our economy at the time. Mineral rights were confiscated and traded with either motherland, Germany, or America at the time, United States. The rights to sovereignty was taken. So that means Herero land no longer existed, or Greater Namakwa no longer existed. We were put to slave labor without pay for years and died as a result of malnutrition and exhaustion. The rights to bodies and skulls, body parts that are either in German museums and libraries, of some that are also in the US, United States, plus also in South Africa, that were sold to the Union Jack at the time, are rights that need to be installed in terms of repatriation of human remains that they can then receive dignified burial. The Namibian government, together with the German government, continued to collude to obliterate the memories of Herero genocide, that's Herero and Nama genocide. In fact, there is a study that was done by the Atenawa Stiftung early 2000, that's 2004. They found that after Namibia's independence, and I quote actually here, after Namibia's independence in 1990 and German reunification in the same year, the Hereros instituted claims for reparation from Germany. By then, however, the two states had already agreed to establish a special relationship due to their historical ties. The German government, these special relations entailed providing Namibia with more development aid than any other country. At the time of writing in 2004, such aid had amounted to approximately 500 million euros. For its part, the Namibian government agreed that continuing development aid, together with the German Democratic Republic's support for Southwest Africa People's Organization, SWAPO, which is the current ruling party. So that support during the struggle for independence against racist South Africa made payments for reparations void. Now you can see there was that agreement to ensure that no payment would be paid, given that our country will continue to receive higher development aid from Germany. Also, with the return of the fact that the scouts in 2011, the Namibia's Prime Minister, Nahazangula at the time, said the following, that basically the return of scouts reflects or is a closure of a history. In his exact words, it reads, these mortal remains are testimony to the horrors of colonialism and Germany's cruelty against our people. The Namibian nation accepts these mortal remains as a symbolic closure of a tragic history or a tragic chapter in our history. So for the Namibian government, you can see that the message that they wanted to send was that with the returns of Scar, it is a closure. We have made good, the German government have made good, so there's no need for further demands for reparations. That ties very well with the agreement at the beginning of 1990. Also in 2016, when the Linge, the left party, they wanted to table a motion to recognize the Nama and Herero genocide in the Ubuntukgotla, the Namibian government actually intervened and requested German MPs to drop the genocide debate. You can see that the Namibian government has worked hard or has been at work to ensure that reparation payments is not discussed or no payment is paid. We continue with our struggle to campaign and to put more pressure on the two governments. As a result of that, in 2015, the bilateral negotiations started between the two governments at the exclusion of the genocide victims. We stood fast, we intensified the campaign, we worked hard, we internationalized the campaign, and we then coined the phrase that nothing about us without us, so nothing will be carried out or done in our without us being involved. So this is, as you can see, that's me, but not the big guy, but next to that guy. So that was 26 campaigns, the reparation work in Swakopmund. We are very clear that Germany must pay reparations. There are no ways about it. We stick to that, and we shall continue to push for that, for what we deserve. words. Now, what APPGAR points? Where are we? We are very strong and we are convinced that we have a case because the evidence of whether a genocide was committed or not is very clear. There was a genocide. Maybe it's the only genocides that I have heard where the perpetrator put it in writing, executed the plan, recorded the whole plan to the end. And after completion of the extermination process, in this case, General Luther von Trotter was given the highest military order by Wilhelm the Kaiser himself for a job well done. So there is a lot of records. So the written extermination orders are material evidence, and the original copies of these orders are still in the archives here in Namibia and Botswana. The imperial land and livestock expropriation decrees of 1905 and 1907 are there in writing as part of the record. And these were imperial government's decisions, proclamations from Berlin. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Article 18, states that Indigenous people have the right to participate in decision-making, which would either directly or through their chosen representatives. And also the concept of free, prior, informed consent is enshrined in the last article of in the UN Declaration. Therefore, the two governments cannot proceed or discuss or resolve this matter without the direct participation of the victims. And we're not undermining the capacities of Hereros and Namas. We have the capacity to negotiate, we have the capacity to determine the losses, and therefore put up a case. Unlike those that participated in the negotiations on behalf of the Namibian government, I don't think they had the capacity in the first place, neither had they the bargaining power to fight for the case, given that they already compromised. So the other points that support our case is that through our efforts in 2006, the Paramount Chief, or Awashitabi, who was also a president of the opposition party, tabled a motion in Parliament. And because of the political pressures that we have put up at the time, it was very difficult for the so-called government to reject the motion, because it would really go against the spirit of liberation for which Africans in Africa have stood for, to see Namibia or Africans as independent nations. So for them then to side with the German government publicly was to be an embarrassment. Therefore, Parliament agreed that what happened to people was a genocide. Parliament agreed, resolved then that Germany must pay, so Germany must apologize for these crimes of genocide. Also agreed that Germany must pay reparations. Fourth point on those agreements or resolutions adopted in the National Assembly, Namibia's Parliament, was that there must be discussion between affected communities, which were Hereros and Namas, and the German government with the Namibian government as an interested party. So the Namibian government was defined as an interested party. In a follow-up discussion, I think 2011, I think, just 2011, the foreign minister at the time, Ubuntugotkla also emphasized the role of the Namibian government as that of a facilitator. So they were to be facilitating the process, but come 2015, the current president said, no, this is going to be state-to-state negotiation process. This is a Namibian genocide, not a Herero-Nama genocide, but a Namibian genocide. And in fact, is on record saying, if it is a Herero-Nama genocide, that is tribalism, and the Namibian government would not be interested. So then they pushed for that Namibian genocide and negotiated in that manner. And therefore, the benefit or the payments, which is or the outcome of that would go to all Namibians, not necessarily Hereros and Nanas. The joint declaration states the following. In fact, the Germany's response to the joint declaration, they said, look, this is a gesture of goodwill. It's never any obligation for them to pay or to grant any money to the Namibian state, but it's a gesture of goodwill. So in the article or number 18 of that document, it reads that the government of the Federal Republic of Germany make available an amount of 1,100 million euros, that is 1.1 billion euros, as a grant to implement the envisaged projects. Number 22 says both governments share the mentioned above, settle